You're listening to Black Music Scene, a show where we explore the incredible journeys, challenges, and triumphs of Black orchestral musicians who've dedicated their lives to the craft, breaking barriers and defining what it means to be a virtuoso. We're here to celebrate and archive the awe-inspiring stories of our living legends in Black classical music. Today's episode is a special episode of Black Music Scene, honoring Women's History Month. And leading our conversation today are four members of the Black Orchestral Network Steering Committee: Lexi Ligon Hallaway, Deja Wilson, Jennifer Arnold, and Ebonee Thomas. We want to uplift the women who have paved the way for us, give them their flowers, and remember the importance of sisterhood in all of our lives. This is Black Music Scene, cultivating community, lifting our voices, and telling our stories.
Welcome to a special Women's History Month episode of Black Music Scene. My name is Lexi Ligon Hallaway, and I'm joined by three wonderful women who, like myself, serve on the Black Orchestral Network Steering Committee.
This is Jennifer Arnold.
This is Deja Wilson.
This is Ebonee Thomas.
It's Women's History Month. This is a time to celebrate and honor the contributions of all kinds of women throughout history. And here on Black Music Scene, we're highlighting the invaluable role of Black women in classical music.
That's right. So today, we'll be diving deep into stories of resilience, inspiration, and sisterhood. We submitted an open call for people to share their stories and experiences through three prompts. 1, share a story of women or a group of women who helped pave the way for you. 2, share a story of an unsung woman who deserves her flowers or recognition. And 3, talk about what Black sisterhood in classical music means to you. Today's episode is an exploration of these three prompts. The four of us will navigate this conversation together. Throughout this exploration, we'll hear some of the stories that our community members have submitted. For now, let's get into the conversation.
Let's dive into our first prompts. Who are the women who paved the way for me in classical music? I think number one has to be my mother. She is a jazz head. She loves different types of music, especially instrumental music. That was definitely something that was introduced to me at a really young age. And then fast forward, even though my mom wasn't necessarily a classical musician who was in orchestra, I found a group of women in my high school orchestra who later turned out to be part of my own sisterhood, but they helped create a sense of diversity, because we all know in classical music world, it's a lot of white men. And so to be in an orchestra full of women was definitely something that helped step into my own as a even stronger musician, as a stronger woman. So I'm really appreciative of that. But yeah, definitely shout out to Brenda, my mom, because without her, I don't think it would have been possible, because she was the one who introduced me to Yanni, and in turn introduced me to Karen Briggs. And she is a violinist who every time she performs, she's in these bright clothes and she has her natural hair out and just really doing her thing. And my mom indirectly introduced me to that, which helped inspire me to really work and say like, oh wow, there's that visual representation. I can do this, or I can be on stage with my curls loose and not have to try to conform for the classical scene. So I'm appreciative of that.
Well, I'm happy to chime in next. So I will say that I have two. Like Deja, my mom is one of them. My mom was a violist who actually majored in music education at Central State, the only violist when she was in school. So she had a love of music, and then she started me on Suzuki violin when I was 4. And one of the blessings was that she took adult classes while I took my beginning classes, so we played duets together in our twinkle. So it was really nice to have the start of my violin experience playing songs with my mother. She definitely paved the way for me because she started me. But I wanted to give also a shout out to this group of wonderful professional Black women in Cleveland, Ohio. They used to be called the Shaker Heights Interest Group when I was growing up, and now they are called Shareholders in Growth, SHIG. And these women have been together at least 30 years, maybe even 40 years. And they are all professional Black women in Cleveland who, most of them are amateur musicians or have a love of music. And they provide scholarships for young people in Cleveland, for young Black musicians, I should say, in Cleveland. And when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, they provided full scholarships to the Interlochen Arts Camp in Interlochen, Michigan, which was about, I would say at that time, about $3,500 per student. And it was an 8-week summer camp that allowed me to really grow as a musician. I went first when I was 8 years old for 8 weeks, and it made me fall in love with orchestra. I went after that for 9 summers, and they probably gave me 4 or 5 full scholarships. So they really changed my life because I ended up in an orchestra professionally, but it exposed me to so many great artists, so many great experiences. I fell in love with the viola there. I started off on violin, like I said, but Interlochen gave me my first viola experience because of a shortage of violists. And so I got put on viola rotation, and it just changed my life. It opened the doors to my future career. So shout out to the Shareholders in Growth, also known as SHIG, who still continues to provide full scholarships to summer camps and scholarships to Black musicians in Cleveland, which will continue to change people's lives, just like mine.
So this is Lexi, and I ended up getting into classical music because of my mom, similarly to Deja. My mom grew up in Croydon, England. She was the daughter of 2 Jamaican immigrants, and she actually started off on the cello when she was 9 years old. She actually went to a school, a really great public school that had an extra cello for her to take home because she couldn't afford her own instrument. And she ended up just teaching herself how to play entirely on her own. Learned how to read music, learned how to read all 3 clefs. Alto clef is important. And she ended up winning all kinds of regional and county awards for her playing. So she is largely the reason why I got into classical music. When she came to the States, she couldn't play anymore because she had to leave her cello. But she ended up, for her 60th birthday, we got her a cello, and she retaught herself how to play. She also played piano, and she constantly listened not only to classical music, she listened to folks like Yo-Yo Ma and Libera because she was really into the Anglican music scene, but also she loved jazz, she loved reggae music, of course, because she was Jamaican, and all kinds of genres. So growing up, I was hearing an influx of different types of music from all over the globe, all featuring Black folks, including some classical music. So when I expressed interest in wanting to play classical music, she was extremely excited, very, very supportive, and she was the person who yelled at me to practice viola and came to all of my recitals, came to all of my concerts, drove me to summer camp every summer, and on the way we would listen to Libera and Yo-Yo Ma and Dizzy Gillespie and all kinds of folks, Wynton Marsalis, and she was largely the reason why I ended up being interested in classical music, and she's the reason why I am where I am today.
So it's my turn. This is Ebonee, and just like my friends here, my mother was a huge influence in a very indirect way. My mother's actually an electric engineer. I don't have any classical musicians in my family. My uncle's a jazz pianist, so we're kind of the only 2 professional musicians. But I just really applaud my mother because she just kind of let me chase my dreams. She doesn't even know what a treble clef is. And when I first started music, I actually started on piano and violin, and it wasn't for me. So my mother was like, if you pick a wind instrument, you can do jazz music, you can do classical, you can do orchestra, you can do chamber. And I was like, great, I'm gonna play the trumpet. And she was like, no, you're not. Too loud. I mean, little does she know that I would eventually become a piccolo player, which is equally as loud. So I picked the flute, or I always say the flute chose me. And it was a very isolating experience for me, actually, because it wasn't really until I was in college that I was even really aware of other Black classical musicians. But what my mother did, and I think I still have this CD somewhere, is she bought me a Bobby Humphrey CD, and she is a Black jazz flutist, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I listened to this CD every day. I even still play Amazing Grace on my alto flute because of that CD. And so I was just like, wow, I mean, there's someone who looks like me out there. And then as I got older and I went to school, as I'm listening to music, I discovered Imani Winds, and I'm like, whoa, Valerie Coleman. I mean, even to this day, she's Superwoman for me. I think she's so incredible. And I went on to study at the New England Conservatory. And every Friday, I would sit up in the balcony at 2:00 and watch my teacher perform. And I look over and I see Ann Hobson Pilot, and I'm like, leaning and squinting. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, it was like Christmas, because up until that point, it really was very isolating for me. So I just applaud all these women who have been a huge influence to me.
Period. I love that. I think too, I want to definitely chime in that I forgot to mention. One woman that definitely helped mold my classical music journey was Mrs. Chang now, but at the time she was Miss Wong. She was my music teacher for middle school and high school. She was actually the reason why I went to a performing high school, because she got a job there and she told me about it, and I was like, I'm going where you're going. But she was somebody who really saw the potential that I had as a kid. She knew that I didn't have much. She knew that she had to have pulled some strings in order to get me in the music program, to have a cello, yada, yada, yada. But she also saw my passion and my love for the instrument early on. And she was like, no, like, you can do this. You can apply for solo and ensemble. You can audition for all region. You can do these things, when I didn't think it was a possibility, just because I would look at my other classmates and they would go to lessons every week and be playing these really technically difficult songs that I couldn't really play yet. But definitely Miss Wong, she, in addition to my mother, was such a pivotal role, I think, in my classical music training early in middle school and high school, and just getting me to think outside of the box, outside of the bubble that I was first shown. I just think it's really cool. What I observed is, at least for us four, our mothers played a really big part in our musical careers. And I just think that that's really cool, that there was a lot of that feminine maternal energy that helped mold us.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like our mothers all kind of led us into this uncharted territory with no reference, like prior reference. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit like blind faith, but they all really had faith in us, which is, I think,
period.
Cool. Yeah,
exactly.
And I wonder if a little bit, when people say, you know, supportive parents, right? This is why they went into music, because their parents support a career in music. Because you do hear of people who don't have supportive parents and how they're just out there like trying to make it and trying to figure it out. And I mean, we're all trying to make it and figure it out, but that without that support and that guidance from your parents, it can really, really be a hard field. So I think it's just amazing that, you know, our stories overlap in the fact that we just had support from the beginning.
I think it's also notable that, you know, it's a pet peeve of mine when folks say, oh, I don't know anything about music, because everyone has some sort of relationship to music. So even though Ebonee's mom wasn't a musician herself, she still had these musicians that she loved to listen to. With my mom, even though she had a nearly 50-year lapse in her playing the cello, she still maintained this love of music. And I think it's important to note that you can very much be supportive of musicians and not necessarily have to play yourself.
I think my friends definitely do just that. So we all met in orchestra in high school, and I'm the only one who's still continuing music as a profession. They're all doing, you know, their respective fields. But at the end of the day, we all can listen to, you know, the Chalk 5 Symphony and turn up together. Just like we can listen to J. Cole's newest album and do the same thing. So I think that foundation, that love, that passion will always be there. And it's just, as you go through life, you start to find different ways to really showcase that or dive into that more.
I mean, this is why I've never really believed the myth of Black people don't really get into classical music or things like that. Besides the fact that we've always been here doing it, I think that clearly, whether people know a lot about classical music or nothing, we love music, right? Any type of music. I mean, we were seeing this we've always been in all types of music anyway, so right there, starting, there's a myth. But I'm thinking about Beyonce and this whole conversation of Black women in country music, as if we're new.
Talk about it.
And if Black people are new to country music. Like, no. Same thing with classical music. Our mothers weren't afraid to start us in this genre because they knew it would benefit us, and the music's not scary and all these other things that are often thrown out there that are just not true.
Yeah. I remember one funny story about my high school experience at this school. There's been a lot of fun times at that school for sure. But I remember we were doing a competition. I forget what it was, but we were the only colored orchestra. It was just a sea of typically, what you see in orchestrals communities. And I remember somebody was playing, I think it was Adagio for strings. And if you know anything about that song, it's very slow. It's very heartfelt. But we were over here hitting the woe and Millie rocking and stuff during that piece, just because that's how we expressed ourselves in classical music. And I think it's just a cool fusion of Black culture with classical music. Yes, it's Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and Rachmaninoff, but we can still Dougie. We can still be authentically us within classical music. And I think high school really showcased that. And now it doesn't matter what it is. If I'm in symphony hall or if I'm on stage, I'm still going to be authentically me, authentically Black as I'm performing and or listening to that.
I mean, the only time classical music has trended on any socials in the last couple of years have been because of Black people.
Okay.
Nobody would have remembered Beethoven 250 if it wasn't for Black people.
Exactly. I mean, I actually ended up writing an article about twerking to Beethoven for this exact reason. Black people can make stuff legible through our bodies. Yes. You know what I mean? So, I mean, even my friend and I won't name her because I don't know if she wants this to go in public, but my friend and I twerk to Coleridge Taylor all the damn time. It hits, I think if you haven't twerked to Coleridge Taylor, you should try it. Cause
Wait, are you talking about CTP Perkinson, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, or Samuel Coleridge Taylor?
Sarah Coleridge Taylor.
Oh, okay. I mean, you probably could twerk to both, but just wondering.
You could twerk to both.
I feel like you could. I feel like the cello suite, there's this one movement in particular that I feel like I'm going to have to run just to give it a go because I didn't even think about that. Thank you.
The first Black woman in classical music to influence me was my mother. She was a tuba player, and when I was in the 6th grade, the band director wanted me to play trombone. I wanted to play the trumpet, so I went home crying to my mother, telling her that I didn't want to play the trombone, and she told me to ask my band director if I could play the baritone horn, because it was played similarly to the trumpet, but it was bigger and had a darker tone. The next day I went to school and told my band director that my mama said I didn't have to play the trombone. She said I could play the baritone horn. Needless to say, my mother did not tell me to say that. She told me to ask. The band director said to me, okay, I'll let you play the baritone, but you better be damn good at it. I had no idea at the time what a baritone horn was, but I was determined to play it and be damn good at it. I went on to be pretty successful playing it, and it was my ticket to a full scholarship for my undergraduate degree. My second year in college, I began to play the flute, and at the end of that year, I became very serious about it. And the next year, I began competing in young artist competitions and met a young lady named Anisha Dexter while listening to a competition. That same year, I met another young lady named Ebonee Thomas, also in the audience listening to contestants at another competition. I became extremely good friends with these two ladies, and to this day, they are among the best friends I've ever had. I admire the amazing classical musicians that they are, and I will forever cherish the times that we've talked about music and played music together, and I still look forward to every conversation that I have with them.
This submission comes to us from Joshua Elmore, principal bassoon of the Fort Worth Symphony. I want to give props to my mother, Robin, for always supporting me and for being my rock throughout my music career. I also want to give props to Chichi Nwanoku for being a trailblazer and creating the first majority Black and ethnically diverse orchestra in Europe. Thanks so much for the submission, Josh.
Moving on to our second prompt, let's highlight some unsung heroes in classical music.
I can start. Okay. There are so many flowers I could give to so many people, but I got to start off with my Sheroes, the Uptown String Quartet. I want everyone to know who they are, buy their music, listen to their music, download their music. These are 4 amazing women: Diane Monroe, Lisa Terry, Maxine Roach, and Eileen Folson, who is, I believe, no longer with us, who didn't necessarily believe in certain genres of music being called certain. They just played music, let's just put it that way. And so their recordings are a mix of new music, new jazz, old school jazz, classical music, gospel, you name it, Black music. And in the, I would say, late 80s, early 90s, they were my go-to string quartet when they were together live. I was lucky to see them several times in Cleveland as a child and as a teenager. Amazing string players, amazing women. They're just shredders. I mean, just absolute shredders. And so I have to give them their flowers. And more importantly, everyone should go listen to them, because some of the best improv you'll hear on string instruments, some of the best energy, some of their gospel. It's just awesome. So I wanted to give them a shout out. And I wanted to give 2 violists and violinists who play, well, I should say people who play both violin and viola. They play amazingly. I grew up playing both violin and viola, so these were also my Sheroes. Alicia Nelson and Nokatula and Gwenyama. So Alicia Nelson is a violist in the Cleveland Orchestra. I'm sure she's been there at least 20 years, maybe almost 25. And one of the founding members of Black Orchestral Network, but she is a hero of mine, or Shero, I should say. She was the concertmaster of my youth orchestra growing up when I was in Cleveland. She was a little ahead of me in college, but I got to see her recitals and things like that. She won concertos when I was in high school. I got to see her performance. Anyways, she's so good on the violin and viola that she was just an inspiration. And then I want to say Nokatula and Gwenyama. I actually don't believe I've actually ever met her, which I can't believe, but she's a violist, violinist, composer, I should also say. And when I was growing up, she had the 60 Minutes feature on TV as being this just amazing musician. And I think I saw that when I was probably a teen. And I was just like, man, she can really shred. And now she's, of course, a successful soloist. And I just love that she also is a composer. And now her viola works and some of her chamber works are being put out there for the world. So anyways, those are my people: Alicia Nelson, Nokatula, and Gwenyama, and the Uptown String Quartet.
I want to give a huge shout out to Marcia Sells, who I actually met a few years ago. So first of all, Marcia has this incredible background. She was a lawyer. She worked at Harvard. She worked for the NBA, Dance Theater of Harlem. She was also an ADA in New York City. So she's done all kinds of really important, impactful work. But more recently, as a chief diversity officer, she's been really, really working to highlight the brilliance of Black musicians, of Black composers, of Black dancers, of Black folks throughout industries that revolve around the arts. She thinks a lot about outreach. She thinks a lot about programming. She also is working to support and mentor other folks throughout New York City who are doing the same type of work. She also works with librarians, with education folks. So I think it's really important that we highlight the work of those who are in what are probably considered to be supportive roles, but they're instrumental to the success of any type of ensemble, but especially something as massive as the Metropolitan Opera. And I encourage folks who are listening to this to please write us back or do your own shout out of Black women who are in these roles like DEI, but also librarians and programming and folks who are doing that important work of uncovering these works that we don't hear very often because of different forces in history that invisibilize this labor. But I think Marsha's amazing. And also, I just gotta give a shout out to my girl, Florence Price, because she's a baddie and all of her music is incredible. She was out here doing all kinds of stuff. A lot of her work was lost to history, unfortunately, but the works that we've been able to find more recently and recover are absolutely stunning. So I love, love, love Florence Price as well. Another person I have to shout out is Lenora Helm Hammonds. She is amazing. She is actually a vocalist, trained classically and in jazz. She's been nominated for multiple different Grammy Awards and things like that, but she's also done a lot of work to uncover vocal works of Florence Price that she has performed herself in salon-type experiences. She's amazing, and she actually has an entire program coming out in June at Carnegie. So Lenora Helm Hammonds, the kindest, most generous person there is. She travels a lot with her students at NCCU, which is a HBCU based out of North Carolina, and she brings her kids up to DC to perform at the Kennedy Center. She brings them to California. She brings them all over the country to possibly to places that they may not have been to previously, especially because of this sort of exclusionary nature of these types of institutions and performance spaces. So Lenora is also absolutely a wonderful person and such a force.
Okay, for me, it's all about the woodwind world. There's not a lot of Black presence, even to this day, really. It's changing. I mentioned previously how I just adore Valerie Coleman, but really the other women in Imani Winds, Monica Ellis and Toyin Spellman Diaz. I just remember they're just so, and to this day, they're so unapologetically Black. And I just remember seeing their album covers, and they're just wearing these vibrant colors, and they've got their natural hair, and they're a household name. They've commissioned so many works, they've composed so many works, and I admire them so much for what they've done for the woodwind world, not just as a Black musician, but for woodwinds as a whole, and they are definitely my unsung heroes. And it's so interesting now that I'm like fully a professional, you know, after listening to them when I was growing up, it's like, now they're my colleagues, and it's just so weird, you know, I'm like, I get to play with Monica Ellis, you know, and we're like talking about nail polish between rehearsals or something, you know, but I admire them so much.
I love that. Whenever I was thinking about this question about who are my unsung heroes, especially when it comes to Black women, I feel like I wasn't really introduced to that population growing up. And that didn't really happen until I want to say the last 4 years. It wasn't until I started college. Okay, well, I guess that's 5-6 years ago now. Doesn't matter. Whenever I really started college was when I got introduced to a lot more Black women in classical music. One person that really comes to mind would be Patrice Jackson. I met her the past couple of years, and she, oh my goodness, definitely she deserves all the flowers. I think what relates most to me with Patrice is our coming up story. She started a bit later in the game. I started a bit later in the game than the quote unquote traditional time that people typically start their instrument. And just the fact that she is always so vibrant, that she wears her traditional clothing and she has her hair and she's just unapologetically her, you know? And then not to mention her buttery music playing and her ability to really take a piece and make it into her own and add a little bit of extra seasoning into it too. And I think that all together is just really, really cool. And being able to speak with her on a personal level and really hear her story and hear her journey just shows the duality between the beauty and strength that she has within the instrument and just within her own journey. So definitely shout out to Miss Patrice, because she's awesome. As well as Marianne Ramos. She is a cello teacher cello professor, at Northern Arizona University. And she is also one of the people that helped pave the way too for me to open the door of diversity in classical music. I think between those two women that I met in my recent years has really helped laid a great foundation for me. I don't want to say I wish that I had known these people earlier in life, because I think that I'm supposed to learn everything that I learn in divine timing. However, hearing these people like Florence Price and the Patrice Jacksons and Imani Wins and all these people that I'm like, wow, y'all are here, we're here, we've been here. And so it's just cool to go through that discovery, I think, in my early 20s, mid-20s, and going through that now. And I think I appreciate it even more so than maybe I would have when I was 12, 13, starting cello.
I love to hear you talk about this because Patrice and Marianne are friends of mine, but they're also my gen, right? And so hearing that they've inspired you, when I grew up with them as late teens, early 20s, this is awesome. I love this.
It's a full circle, you know?
It really
think it's
is.
really awesome. I think it's so
really
fun.
great.
And it just tells you the bridge and the linking between the generations, between the instruments, between everything. I think that's so beautiful. So I love that.
I didn't want to take everybody. I wanted to give everyone time, but I have more. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like there's more women I want to talk about. So
speak your truth.
I want to give flowers to K. George Roberts, who is a conductor, fabulous Black woman who, when I was growing up, she was conducting, I would say, every major orchestra. I saw her conduct the Cleveland Orchestra many, many times, especially for a long time, she did the MLK concerts in Cleveland. And when I was in high school, I was really privileged to play with the Cleveland Orchestra as their soloist, and she was my conductor. And so I always saw Black representation in conductors, especially with her as a woman and leading some of the best orchestras. So I wanted to give K. George Roberts a shout out. She, I believe, may still be at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. She started an opera company, Opera North in Philly, and then I think an orchestra in Boston area, but I've since lost touch with her. I don't know if she's retired or anything, but K. George Roberts, know her. I have to give her so many flowers. I would give her a field of flowers. So I just wanted to say that. And I wanted to give a shout out to someone who recently passed in January of this year. And her name is Dolores White. She's a composer from Cleveland. Actually, I don't know if she's from Cleveland, Ohio, but she spent a long period of her life in Cleveland, Ohio. She was married to Donald White, who was the first Black musician in the Cleveland Orchestra, cellist. And she's an amazing composer, Black woman, pianist, and everything in between. But she has so many notable works. I hope people listen to her music, play her music, perform her music. And in Cleveland, she was part of that group I was telling you about earlier, the Shaker Heights Interest Group, or the SHIG, I should say, and was super supportive with scholarships, huge advocate for new music in Cleveland. I think was part of the Cleveland Chamber Symphony, Cleveland Composers Guild, all those kind of things. Just very active in the new music scene. And she just passed away at the age of, I believe, 90 years old. So, but she had a long, amazing career. Please listen to her works out there, play her works, because she deserves all the flowers. And just like we're shining light on the wonderful Florence Price and the Julia Perrys, the Undine Smith Moores of the world, I don't want Dolores White's music to go hidden on some shelf. So I'm trying to amplify her music because she was just such a wonderful human and such a huge part of my experience in music.
I love that. I love how you were exposed to this, like, at such a young age, just because it's such a different track of what I had, and I can see it, and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah, I always share that I had like a totally different experience than a lot of people. Actually, the majority of people I was surrounded by in classical music were Black. So it was definitely eye-opening when I got to college. Coming through Cleveland, there were just so many people who came through Cleveland. I mean, I saw the McGill brothers when they were like teenagers in Akron. They played a solo recital, like little stuff like that. So George Walker, I saw he had a couple premieres with the Cleveland Orchestra when I was a kid. So I saw George Walker and Awadaj and Pratt and all, you name it. Anyways, Cleveland's where it's at for classical music.
I'm jealous, Jen, because I wasn't the only Black person in a lot of my ensembles growing up, which is also very unique. But there were always Black men. or black men that were mentioned or black men that were celebrated. So the fact that, Ebonee, you got to see Ann Hobson Pilot, like, that's incredible. Jen, the fact that you have so many black women that you can reference to and give roses to, I think that's beautiful. So I think that this type of work is extremely important so that we can continue this type of experience that other black girls growing up can be like, oh, yeah, like, we have Ebonee and we have Jen and we have Deja. Like, there are these three baddies who are, like, out here playing classical music and they're incredible, and I have people that I can look up to. So I think that's beautiful, Jen.
Thanks. Absolutely. But this is also why, we started Bond, so that people don't feel alone, right? And don't feel like the only ones. We want people to feel like they're part of a network, a sisterhood, a brotherhood, everyonehood, a personhood, humanhood, I don't know, all the terms. But yeah, we don't want people to feel alone. We want people to feel supported.
I think that's the one thing that I definitely felt once I started college, was because even though, while yes, on one hand, my orchestra was very, very diverse in high school, we didn't have still as many opportunities and resources as some other counterparts. I'm from Texas, okay? Texas is one of the most competitive states, I think, in the nation when it comes to classical music. And so, we have Houston and then Plano, where there's Suzuki kids who pop out and start playing an instrument. And then, there's other people who may not have as much funding or resources. And I was definitely on that latter end. So I'm very grateful for what I did have, but it wasn't until I think I got to college that, like I said before, things really started to open up. I think one of the last flowers that I want to give is Dr. Yi. She was my music director for only one semester, my freshman year of college, and she really helped turn around how I view classical ensembles as a whole. As soon as we started our first rehearsal, she sat us down, played our instruments, left. The next rehearsal, she said, whoever was first chair moved to last, and then everybody file accordingly. And every rehearsal after that, it was something different. Somebody played the solo. Somebody sat in a different spot. The cello section sat in the first violin section. And everybody was so mixed around, but the method to her madness was really opening up our ears, really understanding where those melodies flow. And I think that was such, I feel like at the time, an unorthodox way of doing things, but that really helped create a narrative of first isn't always the best, quote unquote. Last isn't always the worst, quote unquote. The day of the concert, she can say, fifth chair, you're in first, and that's how we're doing the concert. And I think that I adopted that own mentality in my own teaching with my studio and in my own musicianship as well. And it helps really change my perspective. So yeah, definitely shout out to Dr. Yi. She really did that.
I didn't realize you were from Dallas. I'm from Plano. So I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a little bit of a slightly different experience, and I'm also like a generation older than you, but there were maybe 2 Black kids in my band. And it really honestly wasn't until I did Gateways in 2015. And I remember like it was yesterday, I walked in, it was sort of like the morning meeting. And I walk in and nobody turned around to look at me. And then I just saw these Black people, and I actually left and cried in the bathroom. I was just like, I found my people. Girl. I'm not standing out, and I'm just seeing all these beautiful faces. And it was the best week ever. It really was.
Yeah, that's definitely very similar to me. Growing up, I feel like as a Black classical musician in Texas, it wasn't until high school that I kind of got to feel that you felt like, oh wow, my people were here. Because before then, the same year I did all region, and I wore my hair natural. And somebody literally told me, oh, I can't see in front of, because of your hair, I can't see the conductor. And I had to change my hair, which was a whole thing because that was my hairstyle for the week. And when I had to change up my hairstyle for the week, it definitely did something to my confidence, the way that I view the orchestra as a whole. And so I'm so grateful that there are these hidden things that we were able to discover to help really elevate us and not completely tear us down while we're navigating that. But I didn't realize you were right down the street, sis. That's dope.
Right down the street, baby.
I love that.
I want to recognize my mother, Vashti Leng. She has been the most influential and supportive person in my music life, period. And she happens to be a Black woman. Being Jamaican, she understood the value of education. And even though she wasn't a musician, she understood the importance of practicing, discipline, and dedication, things you need to progress, develop, and excel in any field. Being a parent now, I have a newfound appreciation for the sacrifices she made my entire life, prioritizing me over herself, taking me to lessons, affording me an instrument, sending me to music festivals. These are things that I now appreciate on a new level. Thank you, Mom.
Now, it would be remiss of me not to mention Leontine Price. The first time I heard her voice, I didn't even know that she was Black. All I knew was that it was amazing and I wanted to hear more of it. Imagine how surprised I was when I found out that she was a Black opera star. I learned more about her career, and as I think about all that she accomplished and in the time frame in which she accomplished it, I can't help but marvel at the path that she laid out for so many of us to have successful careers in classical music as African Americans. These women will always play a major role in my life and career as a classical musician, and I am thankful to love and be loved by them.
Let's get to our third and final prompt today. I'd love to discuss Black sisterhood in classical music. I wanted to talk about Black sisterhood in classical music because I have so many friends who are in classical music and who are my closest friends. I don't have any sisters. I have 2 younger brothers. So they were my sisters, right? They all happen to play instruments and we grew up in classical music together, but we have a lot of non-musical moments that have shaped me. And so I wanted to talk about the importance of that and how they've been my support and my joy and will continue to be. So I just thought it was important to mention because I think we have a loneliness issue in the world, especially in the US, I think, where people were isolated for several years. There's a lot of people who don't know how to make friends. They don't have sisterhood and don't know how to find it. And so I think it's important to highlight and maybe show people how to acquire relationships and things like that. But I just wanted to say in classical music, I think a lot of us are connected and that not only just connected, we're really bonded. So it's not just about the work. It's about, supporting life and life moments. So Ebonee is one of those people, my twin. We should talk about how we became sisters.
You have to tell the story.
I mean, I can. So this was Charleston, South Carolina. We were at the Spoleto Festival for a couple of weeks, and I had heard of Ebonee, but I had never met her. And this girl comes knocking on my door in the dorms where we're staying for this orchestra camp thing. I shouldn't say that. We're supposed to be, at that point, professionals or something. I can't remember, but let's just call it orchestra camp because I'm going to. And this girl comes knocking on our door and it's like, Ebonee? And I'm like in my dorm room and my roommate was like, Ebonee's not here and she's not in this room. And the girl's like, no, I just saw her walking in the room. No, it was not Ebonee. It was me. And clearly she thought I was Ebonee.
And she would not be the only person to think that.
And she would not be the only person. This has happened to other. Yes, this has happened to Ebonee and I for many, many different times in many different conferences and orchestra things. We do have a similar build and a similar vibe of awesomeness. So, but yeah.
I just love that story so much because, like, I think at the time you had like long blonde braids or something. Generically, we maybe sort of somewhat look alike. But, like, you know what? You would think the blonde would give it away. But no. And so now we have this running joke. It's like, I mean, I think from that moment on, we were like sisters. But, you know, we call each other our twin. Yeah, she's my twin.
Because I finally met Ebonee a couple of days later because I was like, well, people keep thinking I'm you. So we introduced ourselves and became friends after that and have been on many vacations together.
Many.
And we have spent hours talking in the middle of the night. So, but shout out to sisterhood. So I'd love to know who your sisters are in the industry.
My sisters in the industry, so as I said before, you know, I don't want to call them my day ones because I met them in high school, so I guess they'll be my day twos. They were all in orchestra, but no longer in musical fields, and so I had to kind of step out and to find my own new sisterhood. And honestly, the past couple of years, they have found me, I would say. Shout out to Jasmine, shout out to Lexi, you know, shout out to Asia. These past couple of years has really shown me and solidified this true, authentic love, celebration, and elevation, you know, for other Black women. And I think too, like Jen and Ebonee, me and Jasmine, there is an ongoing joke that we look alike, especially this past year for the Sphinx conference. There was a few times where people mistaked us for each other. So that I think is a little funny. And we both play cello, and us two, I guess, have a similar build. Not that I think about it, but besides the point, I think this past January when we were all in Detroit together, we had a little kumbaya between Lexi, Jasmine, me, and Asia, another person that we met. And it was just a true sisterhood. Like, I was braiding Lexi's hair. We were just talking about just anything and everything from classical music to, you know, girly stuff, I guess. And it was just so heartwarming. And I realized that I was really lacking that prior to that conversation and prior to that experience. And, you know, even though we'll probably see each other once or twice a year, you know, I think we created such a solidified bond and foundation in our relationship and our sisterhood that it doesn't matter if we see each other once a year or every 5 years. It's all love and we're all locked in. And so definitely, I think my tribe now is Lexi, Jen, Ebonee, Patrice, all these people that at once, some of them I looked up to, and now they're my colleagues too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're here. We can actually play duets together and stuff now. But we can also talk about our struggles because we're all adults and we're all going through very similar things together. And so I think those are my peoples. Y'all are my peoples.
Deja, you actually completely stole my thunder with mentioning Sphinx. I should definitely say this to Asia and Jasmine as well, but when Deja was braiding my hair, that was actually an extremely healing experience for me because growing up, this is random, but growing up I did synchronized swimming, which is it's like the whitest thing. Dope. It's whiter than classical music. Like, classical music is like, you know, I don't even know. It's like the most diverse space compared to synchro. It was awful. And every week I would get made fun of for my hair twice a week for 3 or 4 years. In that pivotal middle school years, high school years, where like you're coming into yourself and trying to develop self-confidence. So I actually had a weird relationship with my hair, and Deja was one of the first people other than my mom to braid my hair ever in my life. And the whole time that Deja was doing my hair, all three of them were like, Lexi, your hair is so beautiful. It's perfect. Like, hyping me up. And I was like, oh, damn. Like,
that makes me
so
emotional.
You know? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was
I
the
didn't
most
realize
beautiful
that.
experience. Yeah, we were just like, and I was sitting on the floor and Deja was just like French braiding my hair, and having someone lovingly touch your hair is one of the most, I think, intimate experiences you can have as a Black woman, especially. So that was really, really powerful and healing for me. So thank y'all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what I have to say about that too is I definitely felt that power as well, because there's a reason why when we go to beauticians or barbers, certain people touch our hair. We only let certain people do our hair. And so I definitely am honored. I didn't even realize that I was one of the very few people to even touch your roots, but I'm very honored to have done that. And I take that very seriously, whether if it's my niece who wants me to put some box braids in her hair, or you, Lexi, who wanted me to French braid. I take that very, very seriously because our crown is very precious. Our roots are very, very precious. And I don't know, that just made me emotional. And you know, I would do that every time I'm there, Lexi, is braid your hair, because one, your hair is so soft and it's so fun to braid, but two, you know, just really understanding that background even more so, I'm even honored. So just thank you for allowing me to do that and experience that together.
And thank you for A, showing up with love, and B, knowing how to braid, because none of my girlfriends know how to braid. So God bless you and your beautiful fingers.
I got you. All of it. Box braids, you know, straight backs. I got you.
The other person who is like a big entry point into the Black sisterhood in the industry is actually Patricia Wiesel. So she, for those who don't know her, she is just a powerhouse of everything. She's hilarious. She's a brilliant double bassist. She's Afro-Brazilian, and she is extremely proud of her heritage and culture. But she's also extremely aware of the racial dynamics that happen inside the United States, and she's been here for so long. But I remember I met Patricia like 8 years ago, before I had any type of confidence. And I was shooting a documentary, and I showed up with my camera to Sphinx. And I think she was my roommate. So I came in with my camera, and she was like, "You shooting a documentary?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Oh, you should film me." So that's Patricia, you know, like, she introduced me to everyone. She was so incredibly generous. She's invited me to her house and has let me shadow her at work. She's been a fount of information, and she's also such a genuinely kind and warm person who actually made insecurities that happen within the academic field that I'm in. I wasn't sure if I was making a splash with this research. I wasn't sure if it was needed. You know, for context for folks, I work with Black classical musicians and how we're carving out space for Black brilliance and resilience in the face of white supremacy. So Patricia was the first Black woman to be like, no, this is something that's worthwhile, and thank you for doing this. And I also have to give her a shout out, but also the Black sisterhood element there. You know, she has witnessed me and my terrible dancing, as it has not judged me, you know, like, I'm one of the few Black people who can't dance. It's fine. But she's just like such a kind person. And then I also have to say Jen, you know, Jen I met, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But I would just like email Jen. I was like, hey, like, you're one of the Black teachers this year. Like, I'm doing this research. Can I come shadow you? She was like, yep. And by the way, for reference, folks, Jen was one of the first yeses that I got in, just period, doing this research. So I was just like, oh, it's so easy. And then just, you know, that's Jen. She's very much an easygoing person. She's passionate about this type of work. And also she shreds on that dang viola. I just want to play like her. We've been doing viola Olympics, you know, together. But no, Jen is also the reason why I found out about Bond and ended up being on the steering committee. So that sisterhood there, and Jen is just a very, very generous person. And when I initially asked to work with her to try and get my viola chops back, I was like, oh, well, how much do you charge? Because I want to be respectful of folks' time. And Jen was like, the charge is friendship because we're friends. And I was like, exactly. Oh.
That's so Jen. I can totally hear her saying.
Yeah. I pay and accept that currency, friendship.
Even within this conversation within itself, I didn't realize how much I needed this. And I think I was telling, you know, Lexi a bit about this whenever we were in Detroit, but it's been a little bit of a lone feeling, especially being in Arizona, where I'm based in right now, in Phoenix, and just really searching for that community, for that sisterhood. But I really forget that my sisterhood is not always going to be necessarily geographically where I am, but emotionally we're always connected. And I know that I can, pick up a phone and call Lexi. I could pick up a phone and call Jen and Ebonee. The foundation within itself is just so strong, and I feel the authentic love and here as well. And so just to see the interconnections and interweavings of everybody, I think is so freaking beautiful, and just shows just how connected and powerful, we are as a community.
Yeah, I agree with that so much, Deja. Jen was talking about how she doesn't have any sisters. I actually don't have any siblings. So my friends are really like my siblings, and Jen is my sister. And I remember when I was at NEC, there was like a gaggle of us Black girls. They were all in the vocal department and me, and one who I'm still very, very close with, Michelle Johnson. She's an incredible soprano, and she is killing it out there. But I was an RA in the dorm, and they would come to my floor, and we would just sit in the wee hours of the night and kiki and talk about, how racist people are and like our Blackness. But it was like a really safe space, and like with Jen, it's like, I'm a little bit more introverted. It kind of takes me a minute to warm up, especially in places where I don't feel safe or seen. So it's just always nice. I've known Jen since before we started our careers, and she's seen and heard it all from me and vice versa. And I just love her. She's my sister, just like you all are.
I wanted to give one more shout out because we're talking about sisterhood. So I now have a girl group, which we do a once a year girls trip. It's now I think it's 9 or 10 of us who are Black and brown, but some of those wonderful Black women that are part of this group, I just want to give a shout out to Shelby Harris, Melissa White, Janina Norpoth, who I met when I was 10 years old. All of these ladies around 10 at Interlochen Arts Camp, to see how things come full circle. So these wonderful Black violinists who we're still friends. And then we added, through Sphinx, I would say we added Jessie Montgomery, wonderful composer and violinist. I have a lot of violin friends. And Stephanie Matthews, also amazing violinist, into this girl group. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Joy Payton Stevens, who is a founding member of Bonn, and cellist, who's from Cleveland, Ohio. She's in the girls group too, but I started violin with her sister Larissa Payton when we were 4 in Cleveland. So and her sister is one of my best friends as well, and she went to Interlochen. It's like a crazy, it just shows you how everything comes full circle. But
that is so
those
dope.
are my sisters, in addition to Ebonee, of course, and Lexi and Deja. And we've been through so many life things, continue to be through life things, and we'll always be together. So we've celebrated so many joys and got each other over some of life's saddest moments. But we are always together, and music brought us together, but it's not the only thing keeping us together. Love is probably, I would say. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all those ladies who make every day wonderful for me. I appreciate you all.
I think the last thing I want to say is, as somebody who is, I guess, part of the up-and-coming generation, the younger generation of professional musicians, I think there's such a blanket of comfort, I think, that I've felt these past couple years, knowing that, like, oh, wow, I'm really not alone in this, and just hearing y'all's stories, hearing y'all's challenges, while they may be the same, similar, or different, just like I said, creates a blanket of comfort. Like, wow, I know that I have people to lean on. I know I have a pool of wisdom, a pool of knowledge and tools from other people. So like, I don't have to feel like I have to come up with these solutions alone, go through these battles alone. And so I just want to say thank you as the older generation. Not saying that y'all are, old, we're, a couple years apart, but just to really help pave the way for me, So just thank you, y'all, directly for that.
That's super, super nice.
I gotta talk about how also there's a specific type of generosity that I feel like is specifically Black and female. So again, like with my research, it would not happen, honestly, without Black women, specifically, because I've been connected to so many folks through Black women. So thanks y'all for that. And it's not just, of course, unique to me. It's the connecting folks. It's the mentorship. It's the trial lessons. It's the advice. It's all of that that comes together to support other Black folks and uplift the community. That brings us to the end of our special Black Music Scene Women's History Month conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, my name is Lexi Ligon Hallaway.
This is Jennifer Arnold.
And I'm Deja Wilson.
And this is Ebonee Thomas.
This episode of Black Music Scene was written and produced by all of the voices you heard here today. Lexi Ligon Hallaway, Deja Wilson, Jennifer Arnold, and Ebonee Thomas, alongside David Norville. Special thanks goes to Donald Bohannon and Jerome Gordon for their submissions today. Special thanks also goes to Scott Buckley for providing music for this episode. The Black Orchestral Network is sponsored by the Gateways Music Festival and generously supported by the Mellon Foundation and the New York State Council on the Arts. The Black Music Scene podcast is a product of the Black Orchestral Network, where our mission is to cultivate community, lift our voices, and tell our stories. If you'd like to get involved and support the Black Orchestral Network, please visit blackorchestralnetwork.org. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.